Welcome, wanderer of dark histories. Before we step into the forbidden heart of ancient China, a world where brides were sharpened into weapons more deadly than any blade, take a breath, steady your pulse, and remember this. Every smile in the Imperial Palace once hid a secret, and every secret could kill. Tonight, we begin the story of the Poison Brides. If you find yourself drawn into this shadowed tale, don't forget to subscribe for more dark history you won't hear anywhere else. The capital always smelled faintly of smoke at night, not the smoke of fire or destruction, but of incense burned in temples and shrines, winding through the air with the softness of morning silk. Lanterns hovered like red ghosts over the broad stone avenues, trembling whenever a breeze whispered through the city. It was on such a night, long before dawn touched the eastern sky, that the truth about the empire's darkest custom revealed itself. The palace rose in the center like a sleeping beast, grand yet suffocating. Its golden roofs shimmered even without moonlight, catching stray reflections from hundreds of lanterns in the courtyards below. It looked peaceful from a distance, but everyone within its reach understood the truth. Peace was an illusion, and the palace itself was built to devour those who entered its gates, especially its brides. The palace was preparing for a wedding that night, though not the kind sung by musicians or embroidered into silk scrolls. Inside the Hall of Waning Stars, a girl kneeled alone on the polished floor as servants circled her like silent spirits. She was beautiful in a way children sometimes were, delicate, trembling with wide eyes, reflecting fear as clearly as water reflects the moon. Her name was Binger. She was only 15. A hand tightened in her hair, lifting her chin. An older woman, dressed in black and silver robes, with sleeves that trailed like twin shadows, observed her with sharp, unblinking eyes. Her face was smooth, her lips the thin line of someone who had forgotten how to smile decades ago. This was the matron's leader, the mistress of the inner court. "She will do," she murmured, voice deep and cool. "Her fear is fresh, unspoiled. It will settle into obedience within a month." A servant behind her nodded quickly. Another dabbed Binger's cheek with white powder, muffling her color until she resembled a porcelain figure, fragile, cold, and replaceable. Above them, hidden behind a carved lattice window, Empress Xun watched. The Empress leaned forward slightly, one finger tapping the wooden rail. She was a woman carved of ambition, each line of her body refined into a perfect mask of dignity. But her eyes shone with an unspoken hunger. She had ruled beside the emperor for 7 years, but it was she, more than ministers, generals, or scholars, who determined which forces moved behind the palace curtain. She was the hand that held silence, and she was the hand that created the poison brides. She did not look at Binger with pity nor with malice. Instead, her expression held calculation, cold mathematics written in human form. "She is small," the Empress murmured to the eunuch standing near her shoulder. "Small girls earn sympathy quickly. The nobles will not suspect her." The eunuch bowed. "Your Majesty is wise." Binger, unaware that the highest woman in the empire had already weighed her soul and found it useful, stared at the cold stone beneath her knees. Her wrists were bound in red silk ribbons, the color of marriage, yet she felt no warmth in them. They tightened with each breath she drew. The mistress of the inner court snapped her fingers. 2 servants stepped forward with a lacquered tray. Upon it sat a jade cup filled with shimmering liquid that glowed faintly in the candlelight. "This is the first step," the mistress said, offering the cup to Binger. "A bride must be able to drink what she gives. Poison does not choose its victims. Only the trained survive it." Binger's lower lip trembled. Am I to die?" "If you were meant to die, child," the mistress replied evenly, "you would not be worth training." The words chilled her more than the cup in her hands. "Drink." Binger obeyed, because obedience was the only thing left to her. The liquid scorched her tongue, then cooled, then spread through her stomach like wildfire. She gasped, clutched her abdomen, and convulsed. One servant held her steady, another timed the reaction with a water clock. They did not comfort her. Comfort was not a resource the palace expended where poison brides were concerned. The Empress finally turned away from the window. "She will live," she said with certainty.
"How can your Majesty be so sure?" her eunuch asked. "Because she must," Xun replied. "A bride who dies here is an inconvenience, but a bride who dies inside the home of a traitor serves the empire." Her sleeves swayed like twin wings as she walked away, the scent of sandalwood drifting behind her. Meanwhile, in a far poorer district of the capital, another girl woke from a nightmare she could not name. Mei-lin sat up in her small wooden bed, heart pounding. She was 18, older than most tribute girls chosen for palace marriage, yet far more capable than she knew. Her family lived modestly. Her father worked at the dye workshop, shaping bolts of red silk for the wealthy. Mei-lin often helped him, dipping fabrics into vats of color until her arms ached. Her skin carried faint stains of crimson that no soap could wash away. Tonight, those stains seemed like warnings. The dream lingered behind her eyes, lanterns falling like blood drops, brides whispering in a language she didn't recognize, and a woman with iron eyes calling her name. She pressed her palms to her face, breath uneven. "It's only a dream," she whispered. But the wind outside rattled the shutters harder than usual, as if insisting it wasn't. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and walked to the small window. The city stretched outward, still quiet before dawn. But something felt different, like the air itself watched her. And far away, the palace lanterns burned brighter than they should have, glowing as if fed by something alive. At that same moment, a knock echoed at her family's door. Her father answered. Mei-lin peeked from behind him and froze. A government officer stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 palace guards. His expression was polite but unreadable, the kind of face worn by men who delivered misfortune dressed as opportunity. "By imperial decree," he announced, unrolling a silk scroll, "the household of Master Zhang Wei-shun is honored to contribute 1 daughter to the upcoming bride selection." Mei-lin felt her blood run cold. Her father bowed deeply. "Sir, we only have 1 daughter. She is all we have." "Then the honor is hers." The guards stepped forward. And Mei-lin realized the dream had not been a warning, it had been a summons. Within the hour, she was led through the city gates, following a path that countless girls before her had taken, yet few ever returned from. She looked back only once. Her father stood in the doorway, helpless. Lantern light washed over his face, turning his tears into glistening threads. Mei-lin whispered goodbye without sound. As she approached the palace, the air thickened, crawling into her lungs like smoke. The grand gates opened slowly, with a groan that felt almost alive. Inside, silhouettes of eunuchs, bridesmaids, and mistresses moved like shadows. She did not know it yet, but her arrival marked the start of a chain of events that would shake the empire itself. She would not remain just another bride chosen by chance. She was destined to be the one who broke the cycle. But before destiny could touch her, she was swallowed by the palace, just like all the others. The gates closed behind her with a heavy thud. And in the quiet that followed, the empire's greatest secret stirred awake, turning its gaze toward the girl who would one day challenge the throne. The moment Mei-lin crossed the threshold of the palace gates, she felt as though the world she had known folded itself behind her like a discarded painting. The sun had not yet risen, but the palace grounds were already awake, alive in a way that made the hair at her nape lift. Servants moved like drifting spirits, their footsteps soft, their eyes avoiding hers. Lanterns burned with a copper glow, casting long shadows that stretched thin across the courtyard stones, as if trying to reach for her and pull her deeper. A cold hand touched her shoulder. "Do not wonder," a eunuch said, his voice thin, sharp enough to slice through her fear. "Girls who wander vanish before they are even registered." Before Mei-lin could respond, he turned and led her toward a line of kneeling girls. Some were trembling, some stared blankly, already surrendered to whatever fate awaited them. Others cried quietly into their sleeves. Red silk ribbons bound each girl's hair in a bridal loop, though none looked old enough to be truly married. It was a scene both sacred and cruel, wrapped together. Mei-lin lowered herself beside a girl with braided hair and soft features. The girl glanced at her with wide, terrified eyes. "Are you chosen too?" the girl whispered. Mei-lin nodded slowly.
"I'm Yun," the girl said, voice trembling. "From the river villages. I didn't know my name would be called. I thought they were choosing the daughters of nobles, not people like us." Mei-lin didn't know how to answer. Her throat tightened. She could only offer a small, gentle nod. A loud gong reverberated across the marble courtyard. Everyone flinched except the eunuchs, who stood with military stiffness. From the palace hall emerged the mistress of the inner court, the same woman who had inspected Binger the previous night. Her steps were slow but commanding, her gaze sweeping over the girls like a blade searching for weak seams in armor. "You are here," she began, her voice steady, almost soothing, "because the empire has honored your families. A bride chosen by the palace brings pride to her ancestors, safety to her home, and dignity to her lineage." Yun swallowed hard. Mei-lin kept her eyes lowered. "But understand this," the mistress continued, her tone sharpening. "The palace does not keep what it cannot use. Obedience is survival. Hesitation is death." A chill swept through the line of girls. Mei-lin felt it settle into her bones like winter frost. The mistress raised her hand. Eunuchs moved forward with wooden tablets, each tablet carved with a number. When one was placed before Mei-lin, the carved number stared back at her like a judgment. Her number, 37. She did not yet know that within the palace walls, Numbers were more important than names. The girls were herded into an interior hall, where the ceiling soared high enough to swallow their fear into the rafters. Silks of deep red and gold draped the walls, embroidered with phoenixes, dragons, and lotus flowers. Beautiful, majestic, and utterly suffocating. Mei-lin noticed the windows were shuttered. Not a single ray of dawn touched the hall. As the mistress walked down the aisle between the kneeling girls, she paused before each one, studying their faces as if reading secret messages written in their skin. When she stopped before Mei-lin, the mistress tilted her head slightly. "You are older than most," she said. Mei-lin's heart leapt painfully, her voice caught in her throat. "Yes, mistress." "And yet, your eyes—" The mistress leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper only Mei-lin could hear. "Your eyes do not tremble. That is good. A bride with steady eyes lasts longer."
Mei-lin didn't know whether it was a compliment or a warning. She kept her gaze lowered until the mistress moved on. Xun leaned toward her, whispering, "What did she say?" Mei-lin shook her head faintly. "Nothing I understand." The selection continued. Girls were examined, posture checked, hands inspected, skin tested for blemishes, even teeth examined. Some were dismissed immediately, dragged away by palace guards. Their cries echoed briefly, then vanished as though swallowed by the palace itself. Xun's turn came. When the mistress inspected her, she paused, narrowing her eyes. "Fragile," the mistress murmured, "but with proper training, perhaps useful." Xun visibly sagged with relief when she wasn't dismissed. Mei-lin offered her a small smile, but her own stomach remained in knots. When the selection ended, only 16 girls remained, including Mei-lin. The mistress clapped once. "You will now be bathed." The word seemed harmless enough, but the eunuchs who stepped forward carried buckets of steaming liquid that smelled of bitter herbs and crushed minerals. They stripped the girls of their clothes without ceremony, guiding them into a bathing chamber filled with flickering candles and veils of steam. The water inside the massive marble basin was not clear, but tinted faintly blue, shimmering with powder that swirled like smoke underwater. Mei-lin dipped a finger into it. "It tingled," she murmured. "This is—" a voice behind her replied. Mei-lin turned. A young woman dressed in the pale robes of a senior maid approached. "An immunity wash. It hardens the skin, strengthens the body. Those who react poorly are dismissed." Dismissed, Mei-lin knew by now. That was a euphemism. The eunuchs pushed the girls in. Cold shock seized Mei-lin's lungs. Her skin prickled painfully as though needles pressed into her pores. Xun whimpered beside her, clutching Mei-lin's arm. "I don't like this," Xun whispered. "Stay close," Mei-lin said softly, though she didn't feel steady herself. The bath lasted far too long. For some girls, the water caused rashes. For others, dizziness. One fainted entirely and was carried away. No explanation, no comfort, only silence followed. When the remaining girls were finally allowed out, servants dried their skin with rough cloths. Some girls trembled uncontrollably. "You are no longer daughters," the mistress announced from the doorway. "From this moment, you are candidates for the Court of Blossoms." Mei-lin frowned. "Court of Blossoms?" she whispered to Xun. Before Xun could answer, a senior maid explained, "It is where the trained brides serve, or rather, where they are shaped to serve." Mei-lin's breath hitched. The mistress continued, "You will eat what we give you, sleep where we place you, learn what we teach you. In time, one of you may be chosen to enter the emperor's bridal registry or be assigned to the noble houses. Remember this, your value is not in beauty alone, but in obedience, silence, and skill. Skill. The word lingered ominously. The girls were given new clothing, simple cream-colored robes tied with red sashes. Names were no longer used, only numbers. Mei-lin's sash was embroidered with 37. Xun's was 9. The Court of Blossoms lay deep within the palace, far beyond the public halls. As they walked, Mei-lin saw glimpses of a world both beautiful and terrifying. A courtyard filled with cages of exotic birds, silent birds, who did not sing. A garden where lotus flowers grew in unnatural colors, fed by water that shimmered green under the morning sun. A training yard where older brides practiced movements so graceful they looked like drifting petals, until Mei-lin noticed they were handling blades disguised as hairpins. One bride moved so swiftly her hairpin sliced through a falling petal. The petal fell in two. Xun gasped softly. Mei-lin felt her breath catch. A senior maid saw their awe. "Do not stare," she warned. "They are not ornaments. They are instruments." Instruments. The palace did not train brides. It honed weapons. At last, the girls reached a long dormitory filled with neatly arranged wooden beds. Unlike the grandeur outside, this place was stark, clean, and cold. Each bed had a single blanket, a thin pillow, and a small wooden chest. Mei-lin sat on her bed, her legs trembling from exhaustion and shock. Xun sat beside her. "Do you think we'll survive this?" Xun whispered. Mei-lin tried to answer. She wanted to lie, to comfort Xun, to say they were safe, but the truth lay heavy on her tongue. "I don't know," Mei-lin finally said, "but I will try, and I think you should too."
Before Xun could respond, the mistress entered the dormitory. The girls scrambled upright. "You begin your first lesson at dusk," she announced. "Rest now. When the sun sets, your childhood ends." Her gaze swept the room, lingering for a moment on Mei-lin. "And your usefulness begins." With that she left, the door closing behind her with a thud that echoed like the ceiling of a tomb. Mei-lin lay down slowly, staring at the ceiling. The world she had known, her father's workshop, the safe glow of the lanterns by the river, the warmth of familiar streets, felt impossibly far away. But beneath her fear simmered something else. Not rebellion, not yet, but a question. Why her? Why had she been summoned by a dream before the soldiers arrived? Why had the mistress seen something in her eyes? Why had the palace, this living, breathing maze of secrets, seemed to watch her? She closed her eyes, trying to rest, but her mind churned. And somewhere deep inside the palace, in a room she did not yet know existed, Empress Xun stood before a map of the empire, her fingers tracing a southern province on the parchment. "A storm is coming," the Empress murmured, "and storms require careful preparation." The eunuch beside her bowed. "Shall we test the new arrivals, Your Majesty?" A faint smile touched the Empress's lips, the kind that held no warmth. "Yes," she said, "begin with 37. Mei-lin's number. Her fate had been chosen already. She simply had not learned the shape of it yet. Dusk settled slowly over the palace, bleeding into every corridor like watered ink. The final threads of daylight clung stubbornly to the roof tiles before fading into the deep blue of evening. Lanterns flickered to life one by one, filling the walkways with trembling halos of light that hid more than they revealed. The palace never truly slept, but something about night made it sharpen. Its shadows lengthened, its whispers deepened, and its secrets stirred awake.
Mei-lin rose from her dormitory bed when the gong sounded, her heart thudding in her chest. The other girls stirred as well, some wincing from their sore muscles, others too terrified to speak. Yun shuffled to her side, gripping her sleeve. "Do you think this lesson is just etiquette?" Yun whispered hopefully. "Maybe they'll teach us to walk gracefully or pour tea without spilling." But Mei-lin remembered the women outside in the courtyard, hairpins slicing petals mid-air, movements too swift and calculated for simple elegance.
"No," she replied softly. "Whatever they teach us tonight, it won't be anything gentle." A senior maid opened the dormitory door, clapping her hands. Candidates, line up, hands folded, eyes down. The girls obeyed. They were led out of the dormitory and through a series of narrow corridors, their footsteps muffled by woven reed mats. The palace's architecture changed subtly as they walked. Bright murals gave way to bare stone walls. Open courtyards narrowed into enclosed walkways, and the air itself grew heavier, tinged with the faint metallic scent of crushed herbs. Mei-lin felt the shift in her bones. They were being led somewhere hidden, somewhere forbidden. Finally, the corridor ended at a set of wooden doors painted with the image of two phoenixes facing one another, wings outstretched. The paint had faded over the years, chipped by time and secrets, but the symbols still held power. The mistress of the inner court stood waiting. Her dark robes seemed to drink the lantern light, her posture straight as a spear. When she spoke, her voice filled the hall with a chilling quiet. "Candidates, welcome to the House of Silent Needles." The doors opened with a long, creaking groan. Inside was a vast training chamber, lit by high-set oil lamps. The floor was polished wood, marked with faint etchings that looked like the ghosts of previous lessons. Shelves lined the walls, each filled with small wooden boxes carved with symbols, herbs, bones, powders, insects. Yun shivered beside Mei-lin. "This doesn't look like a place brides should be." "That," a voice said from the front of the chamber, "depends on what a bride is meant to do." A woman stepped forward. She was older, perhaps 50, with hair tied into a severe knot. Her face bore the kind of lines carved only by discipline and loss. She wore no makeup, no jewelry, only a thin silver belt around her waist. But the most terrifying thing about her eyes was they were unreadable, like deep pools of ink. "I am Instructor Fei," she announced. "I oversee the training of palace brides." The mistress added, "She has served under 3 emperors. Those who survive her lessons become valuable assets. Those who fail do not return home." None of the girls dared breathe loudly. Instructor Fei stepped closer, inspecting each girl one by one. When she reached Mei-lin, she paused. "You," she said, tapping Mei-lin's chin lightly with a finger. "Number 37. Mei-lin lowered her gaze. "Yes, instructor." "You appear calm," Fei said. "Calmness is a useful trait, but dangerous if mistaken for defiance." Mei-lin stiffened. "I mean no defiance." "Good," Fei murmured. "We shall see if your tone remains steady when the tests begin." The mistress clapped once. The doors behind the girls slammed shut. The sound echoed too long. Instructor Fei motioned toward a table at the center of the room.
where a collection of delicate instruments lay arranged like a surgeon's tools: slender needles of bone and jade, brushes carved from fox fur, tiny spoons, hollow reeds, vials of iridescent liquids. "These," Fei said, "are the tools of survival. As brides, you will enter houses of nobles, generals, perhaps even rival lords. You will be expected to entertain, to obey, to smile. But above all, you will be expected to retrieve information and, when commanded, eliminate threats." A collective shiver passed through the girls. Yun whispered, "Eliminate? But we're just—" "Shut up," Fei said sharply. Even her whisper held power. "Your voices are tools. Use them only when necessary." She pointed to the shelves. "Tonight you will learn the nature of poisons." A maid stepped forward carrying a lacquered tray. On it rested several small bowls filled with crushed herbs, some green, some yellow, some black as soot. Fei picked up a pinch of green powder between her fingers. "This," she said, "comes from the leaf of the mountain nightbloom vine. Mixed with wine, it causes mild dizziness. Mixed with tea, it steals breath." She dropped the dust onto a silk cloth. It hissed faintly, as though alive. Another bowl contained a pale yellow powder. "This one," Fei continued, "is called whisper root. It grows only in the northern marshes. A pinch can silence a tongue forever." A murmur rose among the girls. Finally, Fei lifted the bowl of black powder. She held it carefully with both hands. "And this," she said softly, "is ash lotus, the deadliest of the palace's secrets. A grain the size of a sesame seed can stop a heart within moments. It is odorless, tasteless, and impossible to trace."
Mei-lin's pulse quickened. Fei set down the bowl. "Your first test begins now." A maid handed each girl a small ceramic cup filled with a clear liquid. Mei-lin stared at hers, heart pounding. Yun's hands shook so badly that she nearly spilled hers. "This is not poison," Fei said. "It is a cleansing tonic. Drink it." Relief washed through the room, but only briefly, because Fei's expression hardened. "You will then consume 3 herbs in the correct order to prevent illness. Drink them incorrectly, and you will wish they were poison." One girl gasped. Another began to cry. Fei ignored them and pointed to 3 bowls on a side table, one containing mint blue leaves, one with dried black berries, and the third holding a cluster of pale roots. "The correct order," Fei said, "must be discovered using observation alone. You may smell, you may touch, but you may not taste. If your body rejects the mixture, you will be disqualified." Disqualified. Everyone understood the meaning behind that word now. Mei-lin swallowed hard. Her hands shook slightly as she approached the table. Most girls hesitated, but Mei-lin forced herself to focus. She touched the mint blue leaf. It released a cooling scent, soothing. The black berries smelled pungent, sharp. The pale roots emitted a faint warmth. She remembered her father's dye workshop, how certain ingredients reacted violently if combined in the wrong order. Cooling first, stabilizing second, heating last. Mint blue leaf, then berries, then root. She repeated the order in her mind. Cooling, stabilizing, heating. Yun tugged at her sleeve. "What do we do? Mei-lin, I don't understand." Mei-lin whispered, "Follow the sense. Trust your instinct." Yun nodded shakily. Mei-lin returned to her place, clutching the herbs. When the mistress signaled, all the girls drank their tonic. Mei-lin swallowed hers quickly, the taste bitter but bearable. Then she consumed the herbs in the order she had chosen. Her chest tightened briefly. Her stomach swirled.
She gripped her sash to steady herself. The discomfort passed. Around her, however, other girls began coughing, clutching their throats, gasping for breath. Yun fell to her knees, choking. Mei-lin grabbed her shoulders. "Breathe, Yun, breathe!"
Yun's reaction stopped suddenly. Too suddenly. She inhaled sharply, then exhaled shakily. Fei approached, observing Yun closely. Your body reacted incorrectly, but not fatally. You survived today. Learn from it. But two girls did not rise from the floor. Their bodies lay still. The room fell silent as their remains were discreetly carried away through a side door. Mei-lin's stomach twisted painfully. She had known the palace was dangerous, but she hadn't understood how swiftly life could disappear within its walls. Fei clapped sharply once. This was the simplest lesson. The next will test your steadiness. Another maid brought forward thin needles, some silver, some jade, some bone. Mei-lin felt a chill. These were not meant for stitching cloth. These needles, Fei explained, carry different effects depending on their construction and what liquid coats them. Silver needles wound deeply but cleanly. Jade needles carry infused toxins. Bone needles can be disguised in hair ornaments. She held up a slender needle with a jade handle. This needle can deliver poison directly beneath the skin with a flick of the wrist. It leaves no visible wound. The mistress nodded approvingly. Fei set the needles down. Before you learn to use them on others, you must learn control. Each of you will strike a falling petal with a needle of your choosing. A maid released a handful of lotus petals from a balcony above the training floor. The petals drifted downward like silent snow. Begin. The girls moved hesitantly at first. Some missed entirely. Others struck too hard, their needles clattering against the floor. Mei-lin gripped her chosen needle, a jade-handled one, and inhaled deeply. She focused on a single petal drifting near her. She moved. Her wrist flicked, a swift, instinctive motion. The needle pierced the petal's edge, pinning it lightly to the floor. Fei's eyes widened slightly. Number 37, a precise strike. Mei-lin exhaled shakily. Yun, emboldened, attempted hers. Her needle missed, clattering loudly. She flushed and tried again. Mei-lin helped her retrieve the needle, whispering, "Watch the rhythm. Wait for the petal to fall nearer. Don't rush." Yun nodded. By the end of the exercise, exhaustion pressed down on Mei-lin like a heavy cloak. She wasn't physically harmed, but the emotional weight of what she had seen, the deaths, the tests, the cold efficiency of the instructors, left her trembling inwardly. Fei dismissed them with a final warning. "You are no longer children. The palace will shape you. But whether you become weapons or simply casualties is up to you." Mei-lin returned to the dormitory in silence. Yun clung to her arm. "Mei-lin," Yun whispered, voice breaking. "I'm scared." Mei-lin squeezed her hand gently. "I am too." She lay awake long after the others slept, staring at the beams above her bed as moonlight filtered weakly through the latticed windows. But far from fear alone, something else thrummed deep within her chest. Not strength, not defiance. Instinct. Something inside her was awakening, something sharp, perceptive, coiled like a serpent. And the palace, with all its traps and secrets, seemed to sense it. In her private chamber, Empress Xun stood before a bronze mirror. She traced her reflection with a fingertip, her expression unreadable. She adapts quickly. 37. She may be the one I need.
The eunuch beside her bowed. "Shall we advance her training, Your Majesty?" A faint smile touched the Empress's lips, cold and knowing. "Yes, I think the House of Silent Needles has found its promising serpent." And somewhere in the dormitory, Mei-lin shivered, as though she had heard her fate being spoken into existence.
The Empress's private garden was a place few ever saw, an island of cultivated serenity carved out from the merciless stone of the Imperial Palace. By day, it shimmered with crystalline ponds, rare orchids, and winding bridges painted the color of fresh cinnabar. By night, however, its beauty took on a chilling stillness, as though the garden itself held its breath in the Empress's presence. Tonight was such a night. The moon floated low behind a gauze of clouds, turning the tips of the bamboo leaves silver. Empress Xun walked slowly along a gravel path, her hands folded behind her back. Her silk robes whispered as she moved, her posture straight and regal. Even in solitude, she did not allow weakness to shape her silhouette. She had not allowed weakness of any kind for many years. She paused beside the koi pond, watching the fish glide beneath the surface like drifting spirits. Their scales shimmered gold, red, and white, colors of fortune, prosperity, and purity. Yet Xun saw none of those things as she gazed down at them. Instead, she saw masks. Masks like the ones worn by the imperial court. Masks like the ones she had constructed to hide her own past. Slow footsteps approached from behind. A loyal eunuch kneeled respectfully, his forehead touching the cold earth. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "Instructor Fei has sent her first report regarding the new candidates." Xun did not look up. "And?" "2 did not survive the herb trial. 5 performed below average. But 1 stood out above the rest." The Empress's reflection in the pond shifted slightly, though she kept her expression unreadable. "Which one?" "Number 37. A thin breath escaped Xun's lips, so soft it could have been mistaken for a breeze. She straightened and turned away from the pond. "Fetch the report," she commanded. "Bring it to my study." The eunuch bowed deeper. "At once, Your Majesty." As he hurried away, Xun resumed walking. This time, her steps carried a quiet, restrained urgency. From the moment she'd seen Mei-lin kneeling among the candidates, Xun had known there was something different about her. A steadiness, a silent confidence, the gaze of someone who learned quickly and hid deeply. All qualities a poison bride required. Xun's own history had taught her to search for such traits. Long before she became Empress Xun, she had been Xunrong, daughter of a scholar family loyal to the imperial court. She had been bright, outspoken, and unafraid of challenges. But the court was not a place for fearless girls. It was a place for women who could learn to survive without appearing to. She had learned her lessons painfully. Xun paused at the memory, one she had buried under years of discipline. She had been 14 when her mother was accused of aiding a rival faction. The accusation was false, a fabrication from jealous courtiers. Yet the emperor at the time, weak and easily swayed, ordered her mother's exile. Xun remembered standing at the palace gates, clutching her mother's sleeve, begging the guards not to take her away. But the guards had no mercy. Exile killed her mother within months. Xun never forgot the look in her mother's eyes, resignation wrapped in silent love. After that, Xun vowed never to stand helpless again. She clawed her way upward in the palace, mastering etiquette, strategy, and manipulation with terrifying speed. At 17, she married the crown prince,
another step in a long game she played with no allies but her own mind. When he ascended the throne, she became empress. But she did not forget the people who had orchestrated her mother's downfall. One by one, they fell from favor or from life, sometimes from illness, sometimes from accidents, and sometimes from causes not written in any official record. To preserve her rule, Xun built the poison bride system. If men used armies and swords, she used brides and silence. The palace took daughters from families across the country, girls who would be trained to serve, observe, and, if necessary, kill. They infiltrated noble houses disguised as harmless gifts from the emperor. None suspected them, few survived crossing their path. Xun had created a web of deadly flowers. But now, as she walked deeper into her garden, she felt something she rarely allowed herself to feel: anticipation. The door to her private study slid open. The eunuch who had fetched the report knelt at her desk, offering a scroll tied with red thread. Xun dismissed him with a flick of her fingers and unrolled the scroll herself. Her eyes moved steadily across Instructor Fei's neat handwriting. Candidate 37 completed the herb test with perfect sequence recognition. Shows strong instincts, unusually calm under pressure. Successful needle strike on first attempt. Eyes steady, posture stable, spirit unbroken. Xun's lips curved, not a smile, but something close. She sat slowly at her desk and dipped a brush into black ink.
On the margin of the report, she wrote one word: advance. Then she sealed the scroll with her emblem, the Imperial Phoenix. Meanwhile, Mei-lin lay in her dormitory bed, unable to sleep. Moonlight crept through the latticed windows, creating a pattern of pale diamonds on the floor. The girls around her slept fitfully, occasionally whimpering in their dreams. Yun murmured something unintelligible, shifting beneath her thin blanket. Mei-lin stared at her hands. They did not tremble. The day's lessons replayed in her mind: the powders, the needles, the fallen petals, and the bodies carried away without ceremony. She felt the weight of it, the horror, the reality. Yet beneath it, something else stirred. A strange, unsettling certainty. She belonged here. Or rather, the palace believed she did. Mei-lin was no fool. She knew her successes tonight were partly instinct, partly memory of her father's lessons in scents and dyes. But it felt like more, a hidden thread tugging her towards something larger than herself. She rolled onto her side, closing her eyes. For the first time since entering the palace, she dreamed not of escape, but of revelation. In another wing of the palace, Instructor Fei stood at the edge of the training floor. Her hands rested behind her back. Her eyes were fixed on the fallen petals still littering the ground. Behind her, the mistress of the inner court approached. "You seem troubled," the mistress observed. Fei didn't turn. Not troubled, intrigued. Because of 37? Fei exhaled softly. She learns too quickly. Too quickly? The mistress raised an eyebrow. I thought that was desirable. For the Empress, certainly. For the training process, rapid adaptation can be dangerous. How so? Fei finally turned, her expression grim. Girls who learn quickly also question quickly.
and girls who question do not last in a system built on obedience.
But she has talent, the mistress argued. Oh yes, Faye's gaze darkened. She has talent, enough that even if she chooses the wrong path, she will not fall quietly. The mistress folded her arms. The Empress has marked her for advancement. Faye's jaw tightened. Then we will prepare her. But know this, she is not like the others. Meaning? Faye stepped closer. Meaning she is not merely a flower to be shaped. She is a blade, and blades can turn. Her words hung in the air long after she walked away. At dawn, Mei-lin was awakened by the clang of a bronze bell. Instructor Faye entered the dormitory, her presence commanding silence. "Candidates," she said, her eyes sharp as cold steel, "one of you has been selected for advanced training." The girls tensed. Mei-lin felt Xun grip her sleeve. Faye unfolded a small scroll. "Number 37. Mei-lin felt the air leave her lungs. Xun gasped softly beside her. "But, Mei-lin, you—" Mei-lin rose slowly. Faye nodded once. "Dress. You will join me." As Mei-lin followed Instructor Faye out of the dormitory, she cast one last glance back at Xun. Her friend's eyes filled with fear, confusion, and something else, something Mei-lin hadn't expected: admiration. The corridor outside was cold and silent. Faye walked ahead without speaking until they reached a narrow staircase leading downward. Mei-lin hesitated. "Where are we going?" Faye paused at the top of the stairs. Her expression softened just enough to be human. "To the place where all poison brides are truly made. The chamber where silence has lived for generations." She placed a hand on the railing. "Welcome, 37, to the inner circle." And with that, she descended into the darkness. Mei-lin followed, unaware that each step she took would bring her closer not only to the heart of the palace's deadliest secret, but also to the Empress herself.
The stairs seemed to go on forever, spiraling downward into the cold belly of the palace. The deeper Mei-lin descended, the more the air changed, growing cooler, drier, heavy with the faint, bitter smell of old herbs and something else she could not name. Stone replaced wood under her feet. The echoes of her footsteps twisted up the stairwell like whispered warnings. Instructor Faye carried a single oil lamp. Its flickering light painted shifting shadows across the walls, making the carved patterns seem to writhe and coil like living things. "Do not count the steps," Faye said without turning. "Down here, numbers played tricks on the mind. Focus on your breathing instead." Mei-lin hadn't realized she was counting until that moment. She exhaled slowly, forcing her thoughts to settle. "Where are we going, Instructor?" she asked quietly. "To the place where silence is born. The Hall of Red Ink." The name made her stomach tighten. Red ink was what scribes used to write corrections. Red ink also resembled something else when it dried: blood. At last, the stairs opened into a long, low corridor, lined with lanterns in iron cages. Their light flickered but never truly brightened the space. The stone walls here were smoother, polished by time and touch, yet faint scratches remained. Marks of hands or tools Mei-lin could not imagine without unease. They passed closed doors of dark wood bound with metal. From behind one of them, Mei-lin thought she heard the soft clink of glass. From another, the low murmur of voices cut short as they approached. "Remember this hallway," Faye said. "You will walk it many times if you live. Each door leads to a different form of study: silence, disguise, interrogation, remedy when it is not too late. And at the end," she lifted the lamp. A larger door stood ahead, painted a deep, dark red, almost black in the low light. The color had soaked into the grain of the wood,
as though something had been poured over it again and again. The Hall of Red Ink, Fei finished. She pushed the door open. Inside was a vast chamber, with a high, vaulted ceiling supported by thick stone pillars. Long tables stretched across the room, each one stained in places where liquids had spilled over decades. Shelves covered the far wall, crowded with jars, scrolls, boxed instruments, dried plants, and carefully labeled containers containing powders of every shade. But what captured Mei-lin's attention first were the scrolls pinned to the walls. They were covered in neat writing, columns of names written in black ink, and beside many of those names, a single crimson mark. She stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "You are looking at your predecessors," Fei said, coming to stand beside her. "These are the records of every candidate who entered this hall as part of the inner training."
Mei-lin swallowed. "And the red marks?" "Those who failed," Fei answered. "Some died in training, some died in the field, and some disappointed the Empress." Mei-lin noticed that for a few names the black ink had been harshly scratched through, and over the scratch a thicker blot of red ink had been pressed, as if angrily correcting a mistake. She did not have to ask what that meant. "Where are the names of those who succeeded?" she asked, her voice softer now, more cautious. Fei's gaze flicked to a far corner of the room, where a smaller scroll hung on an iron hook. Its paper was thicker, of higher quality. The list of names there was short, too short. "The successful brides," Fei said, "are recorded only in the Empress's private registry. What you see here are the lessons." Mei-lin looked back at the walls. Hundreds of names, hundreds of lessons. "How many survived?" she dared to ask. "Enough to keep the empire standing, and fewer than you would hope." She walked to one of the tables and motioned for Mei-lin to join her. Laid out in a careful row were 6 sealed vials, each filled with liquid of a different color: clear, amber, cloudy white, deep blue, pale green, and a faint pink. "Today, your lessons will be written in vigilance, in pain, and in memory." Mei-lin's fingers curled around the edge of the table. "What must I do?" Fei studied her for a moment, then nodded slightly as if confirming something only she could see. "First," the instructor said, "you must learn the difference between poison and remedy." She picked up 2 vials, the clear one and the pale green one. "One of these is distilled from river lotus sap, deadly if introduced into the blood. The other is a neutralizing draught that eases the effects of mild toxins. You will have 5 breaths to examine them. Then you will choose which to consume." Mei-lin stared, her heart thudding so loudly it muffled the faint crackle of the lamp's flame. "If I choose wrong? You will not die, not from this lesson, but you will suffer. And if you cannot tell the difference now, you will not last long beyond these walls." Mei-lin took a slow breath. "May I ask a question?" she ventured. Fei lifted an eyebrow. "Few do. Ask." "Why does the Empress prefer this method? There are easier ways to kill enemies than training girls from across the empire. Armies, spies, executioners." A flicker of something passed through Fei's eyes. Respect, perhaps, or the faintest hint of grief. "Armies are obvious," Fei said quietly. "Executioners are feared. Spies are hunted. But brides—" She picked up one of the vials, rolled it between her fingers. "Brides are welcomed, cherished, trusted." She stopped. Expression shuddered again. "And your question is not one you should speak outside this hall. Curiosity is a blade that cuts both ways." She handed Mei-lin both vials.
5 breaths. Mei-lin brought the clear vial close to her nose. No scent. It moved smoothly when she tilted it. No thickness, no residue. The pale green vial, however, carried the faintest odor. Bitter, cool, familiar somehow, like the mint blue leaves from the first trial, but layered with something softer. She glanced at Fei. "May I touch the liquid?" With caution. She dabbed a finger against the rim of the clear vial and rubbed it between her fingers. It left no noticeable feel. When she touched the pale green, it dried with a faint cooling sensation, like distant river wind. 3 breaths left, Fei said. Mei-lin's mind raced. A deadly poison would likely be more subtle, but so would a refined remedy. Unless... Her thoughts flashed back to her father's workshop. Clear solutions were often concentrated dyes or chemicals before color was added. Strong, dangerous, deceptive. The softer tints were usually the diluted mixtures used to refine, adjust, or correct. The pale green reminded her of those corrections. She raised it. "This one," she said. "This is the remedy." And before doubt could take hold, she tilted it back and swallowed. The liquid rushed over her tongue, bitter, but not burning. A coolness spread through her chest, easing tension she hadn't realized was there. Her vision remained steady. Fei watched her closely, waiting for any sign of distress. None came. After several long seconds, Fei exhaled softly. "Good. You chose well." She uncorked the clear vial and poured a single drop onto the table. Where it landed, the varnish darkened, then bubbled faintly. Lotus sap distillate. You would not have died from a single sip, but your heart would not have liked you for several days. Mei-lin grimaced, suddenly grateful for the cool sensation spreading through her body. Fei set the now empty vials aside and beckoned her toward a large wooden box on a side shelf. "Your next lesson," the instructor said, "is about consequence."
She opened the box. Inside, neatly stacked, were strips of fabric. Some gray, some deep red, some pure white. They were all marked with characters written in black ink. Failure, hesitation, disobedience, mercy, loyalty. "What are these?" Mei-lin asked. "Reminders," Fei said, "of choices others made before you." She picked up a strip marked Mercy in careful brushstrokes. "Years ago," she said, her voice growing distant, "a candidate was placed in a noble household suspected of harboring traitors. Her orders were clear: administer a slow poison to the head of the family and report back. Instead, she hesitated. She saw the man playing with his grandchildren and chose to spare him. When she returned, she confessed. The Empress listened and then executed her." Mei-lin's chest tightened. "Executed her?" she echoed softly. "For disobedience," Fei said. "But more than that, for creating weakness in the chain. Mercy not sanctioned by the throne becomes treason." Fei's gaze bored into her. "Do you understand?" Mei-lin held her instructor's eyes for a long moment. She thought of Yun, of Binger, the girl from the first night whose fate she had not seen, of her father in the dye workshop, hands stained red, eyes tired but kind. "I understand what the Empress believes," Mei-lin answered carefully. Fei's lips twitched, just a little. "Better than most," she said. She replaced the strip of fabric and closed the box. "Your final lesson today is written in your own blood." Mei-lin stiffened. "Instructor." Fei lifted a hand.
Not all wounds are meant to cripple. Some are meant to teach. She retrieved a small bone needle from a tray, its tip polished to a fine point. Then she brought forward a shallow porcelain dish filled with an amber-colored liquid. This is a diluted toxin. It will cause pain and brief paralysis in the area where it enters, but it will not kill you. You must learn what poison feels like in your own body if you are to recognize it in others. You will pierce your own forearm, not deep, just enough to break the skin and feel the reaction. Mei-lin's mouth went dry. "Is there no other way?" she asked. "If there were," Fei replied, "we would not still be here after 3 emperors." The lamp flickered.
The chamber seemed to contract around Mei-lin, the walls leaning closer as if to listen. Fei dipped the needle carefully into the amber liquid, then held it out. "Do it," she said, "or walk back up the stairs and ask the guards to open the gates for you." Mei-lin stared at the needle. They both knew that second option did not truly exist. Her hand moved almost of its own accord. She took the needle between her fingers. It was surprisingly light. She rolled back the sleeve of her robe, exposing the pale underside of her forearm. The skin there was soft, unmarked, untouched by knives, thorns, or the world's roughness. She wondered how long that would remain true. She pressed the tip of the needle against her skin. She hesitated. Fei's voice softened, barely above a whisper. "A weapon that has never felt its own edge can never be fully trusted." Mei-lin thought of the scrolls on the wall, of the names crossed out in red ink, of the narrow scroll with the successful brides' names kept far from the others, too few to comfort the dead. If she wanted to survive here, if she wanted to understand the system well enough to maybe one day challenge it, she would have to first walk through it. She inhaled. Then she pushed. The needle pierced her skin with a sharp, immediate sting. A bead of blood rose dark against the pale flesh. A moment later, the toxin woke like a coiled snake. Burning. The pain spread outward in a tight ring that wrapped around her arm, then tunneled inward, burrowing toward bone. Her fingers convulsed, her grip loosened, the needle nearly slipped from her grasp. She clenched her jaw, refusing to cry out. Her fingers stiffened, unable to move, her wrist locked. For a terrifying moment, she felt her arm had become a dead thing attached to her body. Her breathing quickened. Fei watched, impassive at first, then gave a barely perceptible nod. "Good," she murmured. "Focus. Describe it, out loud." Mei-lin swallowed hard. "It burns. Here." She moved her other hand to tap just below the puncture. "Like hot metal pressed against my skin. Then deeper. It feels as if something is squeezing the bones, making them swell inside my arm. My fingers feel heavy." "Any numbness?" Fei asked. "Not yet. Only pain and stiffness."
"Remember this," Fei said. "One day you may notice the same reaction in someone across a banquet table. A slowed hand, a tightened jaw, a loss of control in their fingers. That is when you know your work has succeeded, or when you must warn others." "Warn others?" Mei-lin managed through clenched teeth. "I thought we were not allowed mercy." Fei's gaze flickered again, that strange, shadowed emotion returning for a heartbeat. "Sometimes," Fei said slowly, "the Empress chooses who is allowed to live just as carefully as she chooses who must die. You are a tool, 37, but even tools can be used in many ways." Time blurred. After what felt like an eternity, the pain began to fade. The stiffness dissolved, tingling replaced it, and eventually Mei-lin could flex her fingers again. The puncture wound bled a little, then stopped. Fei cleaned the needle and set it aside. "You did well," she said simply. "Better than most on their first wound." Mei-lin lowered her sleeve. Her arm still throbbed, but she stood straight. "What will you tell the Empress?" "The truth. That you learn quickly. That you endure pain without wasting breath on unnecessary noise. That your instincts favor correction over destruction." Mei-lin frowned slightly. Correction? Fei's gaze drifted briefly to the shelves lined with powders and tinctures. "Not all poison brides are used only to kill 37. Some are used to correct disruptions in the court, to shift the balance of power, to test loyalties." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "And some, if they survive long enough, are given something rarer than poison." Mei-lin's heart pounded. What could be rarer than that in this place? Fei held her eyes. Choice. The word hit Mei-lin like another needle, but this time it lodged not in her flesh, but in her thoughts. Choice. The idea felt dangerous, impossible, precious. Fei turned away, breaking the moment. "Your lessons for today are finished. You will rest now. Tomorrow you will return with the other candidates. I will not treat you differently in front of them. Talent draws knives as quickly as favor does." Mei-lin nodded. "Instructor?" Fei paused at the door. "Yes?" "If there were no Empress," Mei-lin asked quietly, "would this hall still exist?" Fei's shoulders stiffened. For several heartbeats, she said nothing. When she finally turned, her eyes looked older, like someone who had buried many answers and no longer knew which ones were still alive.
"The palace existed before this Empress," she said. "It will exist after her. Poison is older than any throne. The question, 37, is not whether the hall would exist." Her voice softened, turned brittle. "It is who would control the doors." She extinguished the lamp, leaving only the corridor's faint lanterns to guide them back. As Mei-lin followed her up the long staircase, her arm throbbed in slow pulses. Each step seemed to echo with the same word: choice. By the time she reached the dormitory, the sky outside had darkened into deep velvet. Yun hurried to her as soon as she entered, worry etched into every line of her face. "Mei-lin, where were you? Did they hurt you? Did you fail? Did you—" Mei-lin managed a small, exhausted smile. "I'm still here, aren't I?" Yun's eyes dropped to her sleeve, to the faint stiffness in how Mei-lin held her arm. "You're different," Yun whispered. "Your eyes, they look older." Mei-lin sat heavily on her bed. The dormitory felt smaller now, its walls closer, its ceiling lower. "I learned what it feels like when poison enters the blood." Yun paled. "They made you drink it?" "No. They made me do it to myself." Yun covered her mouth, horrified. "Why?" she asked. "So I will know when it happens to someone else." Yun sat beside her, shoulders trembling. "Will they make us all do that?" she whispered. "Maybe. Maybe worse," Mei-lin answered honestly. Yun's eyes glistened with fear. "What if I can't do it? What if I fail?" Mei-lin looked at her arm, where the pain was finally fading into a dull ache.
Then the whole of red ink will remember your name, and the palace will move on without you." The words tasted cruel in her mouth, but they were not meant as cruelty. They were meant as warning. Later, as the dormitory lights dimmed and the other girls drifted into restless dreams, Mei-lin lay awake, staring at the darkness above. Her body hurt. Her mind hurt more. She could feel herself changing, each lesson pulling her further from the girl she had been in her father's workshop. But underneath the fear, beneath the confusion, something else had taken root.
Not loyalty, not yet, but understanding. If she wanted to survive long enough to decide anything for herself, to protect Yun, to learn why the Empress cared so much for girls like her, to ever see the world outside these walls again, she would have to keep walking through the lessons written in blood. She would have to let the palace sharpen her, but not break her. Far away in her private chambers, Empress Xun unrolled the brief update Fei had sent. Her eyes moved over the neat brushstrokes describing Mei-lin's choices, her resilience, her questions. A blade, but not yet pointed. Jun's lips curved faintly. Good. A blade without a direction is merely dangerous. A blade given purpose. She dipped her brush into ink and wrote a single instruction under Fei's note. Assign Candidate 37 to observation drills at the next Imperial banquet. She sealed it and handed it to her eunuch. The girl has learned what poison feels like, Xun said. Now let her see what power looks like before it dies. Outside, the palace lanterns swayed in the wind, trembling over courtyards that had seen countless weddings, executions, coronations, and betrayals. The empire slept uneasily. And in one narrow bed in the Court of Blossoms, Mei-lin finally closed her eyes, not because she felt safe, but because she understood that tomorrow her lessons would go beyond herbs and needles. Tomorrow, they would include hearts. And hearts, she knew, were far more fragile than flesh. Morning broke over the palace in a wash of pale gold, softening the sharp angles of the rooftops and brushing warmth across the cold stones. But it did nothing to soften the fear in the girls' hearts. The Court of Blossoms awakened in a slow ripple of motion, rustling robes and quiet breathing filling the long dormitory. Mei-lin sat upright before the others stirred, her mind already restless, shadowed by thoughts she could not easily tame. She had not slept well. How could she? The Empress's summons from the evening before lingered like a phantom in her ribcage. Instructor Fei had delivered the message in her usual steady tone, but the weight behind the words had been unmistakable. You will be tested in the field. The field. It was such a simple word for what it meant. Stepping outside the boundaries of training into the real world of noble houses, political dangers, expectations, and death. Mei-lin had barely finished processing the news when a soft knock sounded and a senior maid entered with a bound scroll. She handed it directly to Mei-lin without explanation. Inside was a name, a house, and an instruction so brief and cold that Mei-lin reread it several times.
House of Lord Wen Ji, marriage assignment. Tonight. Marriage. The scroll did not say why. It did not say for how long. It did not say what would happen next. It didn't have to. Mei-lin was being sent out as a poisoned bride, and she did not yet know her target. The day passed in a blur of preparation. Senior maids swarmed around her like bees around a sacred flower, each performing her task with swift, exact precision. Mei-lin stood still, breathing deeply as they washed her hair in scented water, smoothed oils across her skin, and wrapped layer after layer of silk around her body. The robes were a deep crimson, wedding color, heavy with embroidery. They felt foreign against her skin, too fine, too gentle for the purpose they served. Her veil was placed over her head last, thin crimson gauze, light enough to see through, but not light enough to allow others to see her clearly. She was dressed like a bride, yet she was not entering marriage. She was entering a battlefield. Yun hovered close during the preparations, her face pale and tight. Mei-lin, I thought the first assignment was supposed to be months after training. Why so soon? Why you? Mei-lin shook her head. I don't know, but she had suspicions. The Empress had watched her. The instructors had whispered about her. And now she was being sent out before she had even learned all the poisons, all the disguises, all the rituals. Was that trust? Or was it a test designed to break her? Yun reached out and grabbed Mei-lin's hand. You come back, she whispered fiercely. Promise me, please. Mei-lin squeezed her friend's hand. I promise. But even as she said it, she felt the promise tremble. The house of Wen Ji lay just beyond the city proper, its estate surrounded by old cypress trees and guarded by stone lions worn smooth with age. The palace escort carried Mei-lin in a small curtained carriage. The ride was silent, save for the steady creak of wheels and the faint jingle of bridal ornaments hanging from the carriage beams. When the carriage halted, the escort opened the door and gestured for her to step out. Mei-lin descended carefully, her gaze scanning the courtyard through the thin veil. Lanterns lined the path in gentle arcs. Servants stood waiting, their heads bowed. Then she saw him, Wen Ji. He stood at the entrance to the main hall, dressed in formal robes of midnight blue. He was older than she expected, perhaps in his early 30s. Tall, broad-shouldered, his posture carried the disciplined weight of a military general rather than a sheltered noble. But it was his eyes that startled her.
They were kind, not calculating, not suspicious, not shadowed by cruelty like she had braced herself for. His eyes softened when he saw her. He stepped forward and bowed respectfully. Lady Mei-lin, he said gently, welcome to my home. His voice was warm, calm, unexpectedly sincere. Mei-lin's heart faltered. This was supposed to be easy. It was easier when targets were monsters, when their sins were obvious, when she could justify their deaths. But this man, nothing about him seemed wicked, which meant either she was wrong or someone wanted him dead for reasons hidden beneath layers of political silk. She bowed back, her movements measured. Her voice, when she spoke, felt distant. Thank you, my lord. Their gazes met briefly through the veil. For the first time since entering the palace, Mei-lin felt something dangerous. Hesitation. The wedding ceremony was simple and far smaller than the grand banquets Mei-lin had imagined. Perhaps it was because Wen Ji was a man of discipline rather than decadence. Perhaps it was because the marriage was arranged quickly, without time for fanfare. Whatever the reason, Mei-lin was grateful. The fewer witnesses, the fewer eyes to watch her trembling hands. Wen Ji guided her gently through the rites, lighting incense, bowing to the ancestors, drinking the ritual cup of tea from a shared bowl. He never touched her without waiting for her to respond,
never raised his voice, never looked at her with suspicion. He treated her not as a gift from the palace, but as a human being. When the ceremony ended, he led her toward the inner quarters. She braced herself. Many noble husbands treated their brides as possessions on the first night, but Wen Ji stopped at the door to the bridal room and bowed deeply. His voice softened even further. "I know you were chosen suddenly, and I know this marriage was arranged with haste. I will not ask anything of you tonight. Rest. The servants will bring food shortly." Mei-lin blinked behind her veil. He stepped back. "If you need anything," he added quietly, "you may send word to me. I am not a cruel man, Lady Mei-lin. I will never harm you."
Mei-lin stood frozen, staring at him. She didn't speak until he walked away, leaving her alone in the dimly lit room. Her hands shook as she lifted her veil. She sank slowly onto the edge of the wedding bed and exhaled shakily. This was not what she expected. This was not at all what she prepared for. Targets were meant to be cold, ruthless political figures drunk on power. Not gentle, not respectful, not kind. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest. "How am I supposed to kill a man like that?" she whispered. There was no answer. Only the quiet creak of the house settling around her like an old memory. A soft knock at the door jolted her. A servant entered with a tray of steaming dishes, lotus rice, broth, delicate dumplings, preserved plums, fragrant tea. A typical wedding feast for a bride. A typical opportunity to poison either the groom or the bride herself if the palace suspected wavering. The thought sent a cold shiver along Mei-lin's spine. But the servant bowed wordlessly and left. Mei-lin sat in silence, staring at the food. Instructor Fei had told her nothing specific. The scroll had said nothing but the marriage assignment. No instructions, no target, no poison, no timing. Which meant one of two things. Either she was meant to eliminate Wen Ji as soon as possible, or she was being tested to see whether she would act without direct orders. A test of initiative, a test of obedience, a test of ruthlessness. Mei-lin closed her eyes tightly. She thought of her father's workshop, of Yun's trembling hand clutching hers, of the Empress's cold smile. She breathed in deeply. She needed more time. She needed more information. She needed to understand why Wen Ji was marked, if he even was. Mei-lin reached for the teapot and poured a cup. She drank it herself. She ate nothing else. Then she lay down on the bed, staring at the canopy above her while lantern light flickered across silk patterns. Hours passed. Sleep did not come. Only confusion, fear, and a quiet, growing sense of danger. Not danger from Wen Ji, danger from the palace. Because if she did not perform her role, someone else would come. Someone far less hesitant than her. Someone trained to finish what she could not begin. Mei-lin curled onto her side, clutching the silk blanket as the weight of her impossible situation settled over her like a burial shroud. The palace had sent her here to kill, but instead of finding a monster, she found a man who looked at her with kindness, a man whose voice held no malice, a man who might become more than a target.
And now the question burned inside her like a slow poison. If the Empress ordered a death, and the death was unjust, did she have the right to refuse? Or would that refusal cost her, and Yun, and anyone she cared about, everything? In the darkness of the bridal chamber, with only the distant sound of wind brushing through old cypress trees, Mei-lin made a quiet decision.
She would not kill Wen Ji. Not yet. Not until she knew why. Not until she uncovered the truth. But she also knew something else. By hesitating, she had already placed her own life in danger. Because the palace was watching. Always watching. And the Empress's eyes were iron. Unforgiving. Unblinking. And they missed nothing. The dawn after the wedding crept slowly across the Wen estate, soft and delicate, exactly the opposite of the turmoil twisting through Mei-lin's chest. She rose before the servants knocked, her mind still flooded with the impossibility of the night before. She had not slept. Her body was exhausted, but her thoughts were a battlefield. Wen Ji had been nothing like the palace warned her targets would be. He was not cruel, not ambitious for power, not violent. He had shown her nothing but kindness, and kindness, she discovered, was far more dangerous than cruelty. At least with cruelty, she knew where to aim the knife. She washed her face in the cool basin, the water reflecting her pale, uncertain features. Her training had hardened her posture, sharpened her instincts, but now, looking into her own eyes, she saw something new, an emotion she had not been trained to suppress: doubt. The door slid open quietly. A maid entered and bowed. "Lady Mei-lin, Lord Wen requests your presence for morning tea." Mei-lin nodded, smoothing her crimson sleeves. "I will come." She walked through the corridor, each step a reminder of the palace's invisible eyes. The Court of Blossoms had spies everywhere. She was certain someone had been embedded here long before she arrived. A gardener, a cook, a maid. Someone was reporting back to the Empress about every breath she took. Her heart pounded. If she hesitated too long, if she showed too much softness, if she failed, the Empress would not forgive her. When she entered the courtyard pavilion, Wen Ji stood waiting near a small table set with 2 cups, a teapot, and a bamboo steamer of delicate buns. Morning sunlight filtered through the cypress branches, dappling his robes with shifting patches of light. He turned at the sound of her footsteps and smiled, gently, honestly. "I'm glad to see you awake, Lady Mei-lin. I worried the wedding day tired you too much." His voice was so open it almost hurt to hear. Mei-lin bowed. "I am well, my lord." He motioned for her to sit. "Please, there is no need to call me lord when we are alone. My name is Wen Ji. I would prefer you call me that." She hesitated. "It would be improper." "Improper is when disrespect is intended," Wen Ji said, pouring tea into both cups. "And I do not feel disrespected by kindness." Mei-lin looked down, unsure how to respond. He pushed a cup toward her. "I do not know how this marriage came to be," he admitted quietly. "The palace sent word with barely a day's notice. But I want you to know something." She looked up. His eyes, those calm, warm eyes, held hers firmly. "You may think you were sent here as a burden, or a political arrangement, but to me, you are a person, not a pawn." Her breath caught. A pawn. He had unknowingly spoken the most accurate description of her entire existence. Wen Ji reached for a bun, but paused when she made no move to pick up her tea. "Is the tea not to your taste?" he asked.
Mei-lin forced a small smile. "No, it is—" She lifted the cup. "It is good." But as she drank, her mind raced. Instructor Fei had taught her to taste subtle differences, bitter undertones, metallic hints, the faint burn of hidden substances. This tea had none of those. It was safe. Why then was she still trembling inside? Because drinking tea with Wen Ji felt like sharing something forbidden, something dangerously close to trust. He picked up his own cup and drank as well. No hesitation, no pretense.
"You must be tired of silence," Wen Ji said gently. "If you wish, you may ask me anything." Mei-lin shifted slightly. "Why did the palace choose you?" Wen Ji's brow furrowed. "I wondered the same thing. I have no enemies at court, no ambition to rise further. I serve as a regional advisor and military tactician, nothing more." "But that is important," Mei-lin whispered. "Yes," Wen Ji said slowly. "But important men are usually given noble daughters, not brides chosen from the general registry." Mei-lin's pulse quickened. "Do you think the palace distrusts you?" she asked before she could stop herself. Wen Ji gave a short, quiet laugh. "If they distrusted me, they would not offer me a wife. They would remove me from my post or send someone to watch me." Mei-lin's fingers tightened around her cup. "They have," she whispered. "What do you mean?" he asked. She realized what she'd said and quickly shook her head. "Nothing. I misspoke." Wen Ji studied her carefully. He was no fool. For a brief moment, his expression held something sharper, more calculating, hidden beneath his gentle exterior. Then his look softened again. "If the palace sent you here with burdens, I will not ask you to reveal them. But know this, you are safe in this house. Whatever fears you carry, you do not carry alone." Safe. The word echoed in her heart like a chime struck in an empty hall. Mei-lin looked away, afraid he would see the storm brewing behind her eyes. "You are too kind." "Is that a fault?" "No," she said, "but kindness is rare in the palace." Wen Ji's expression dimmed slightly. "Have you suffered there?" Mei-lin hesitated. She could not speak of the needles, the toxins, the hall of red ink. She could not speak of Fei's warnings, or the Empress's cold gaze, or Yun's trembling hands. "I survived there," she said simply. Wen Ji lowered his cup, his jaw tightening at her tone. "Then I will ensure you do not suffer here." The sincerity in his voice nearly broke her. She stood abruptly. "I should walk the estate. I must become familiar with my surroundings." "Of course," he said, rising with her. "If you need guidance—" "I prefer to go alone." He nodded slowly. "Then take your time. And Mei-lin—" She paused. "I am glad you are here." She left without responding. She could not when her heart was twisting painfully inside her chest. The Wen estate was vast. Courtyards opened into gardens, gardens into covered bridges, bridges into secluded pavilions. Every corner carried the scent of cypress, stone, and quiet dignity, so different from the palace's oppressive grandeur. Mei-lin walked aimlessly, her thoughts tangled. This assignment was supposed to be simple: marry, observe, kill. But Wen Ji's kindness had made the blade in her heart tremble. What if he was innocent? What if he was simply caught in the gears of a machine he could not see? What if her hesitation doomed someone else, Yun, or her father, or herself? She reached the far garden, where a single willow tree swayed above a small pond. She knelt beside the water,
the reflection of her bridal robes rippling with the breeze. "Why was I sent here?" she whispered to her reflection. "Why him?" A soft voice spoke behind her. "Because you hesitate." She spun around. A young woman stood in the shadows of the willow branches, dressed as a simple servant, her expression neutral, her hands folded neatly. But her eyes were sharp. Too sharp. Mei-lin stiffened. "Who are you?" The woman bowed respectfully. "A fellow daughter of the palace, number 37. A chill ran down Mei-lin's spine. A poison bride. Sent to watch her. Sent to judge her. The woman stepped closer, her smile gentle but deadly. "You were sent here to observe Lord Wen Ji and kill him if necessary." Mei-lin forced her voice to remain steady. "Because I have no proof he deserves death." "That is not for us to decide," the woman replied calmly. "The Empress commands. We obey." Mei-lin met her gaze. "What if the command is wrong?" The servant bride's smile sharpened. "There are no wrong commands, only disobedient brides." Mei-lin felt her pulse thrum painfully in her throat. The woman stepped even closer, lowering her voice to a whisper that curled like smoke. "Do your duty soon, 37, or I will complete the mission."
A pause. "And then I will report your hesitation." Mei-lin's breath caught. The woman bowed once more, calm, polite, deadly, then disappeared into the garden shadows. Mei-lin clenched her fists until her nails dug into her palms. Her heart was no longer just heavy with doubt. It was burning with something new. Anger, fear, and a growing, impossible resolve. If she killed Wen Ji, she would lose herself. If she didn't kill him, the bride in the shadows would. And the Empress would destroy Mei-lin's life. There was only one path left. Find the truth, protect Wen Ji, and somehow survive the Empress's wrath. Forbidden as it was, Mei-lin made her choice. Not to obey, not to rebel blindly, but to uncover what truly lay behind this assignment. Because she was no longer just a bride sent to kill. She was becoming something far more dangerous. A bride with a forbidden heart. And hearts, Mei-lin knew, could change the fate of empires. The palace had always been a place of shadows. But on the night of the emperor's mid-autumn feast, those shadows dressed themselves in silk and jewels. Lanterns the color of blood and honey swayed from every beam. Musicians tuned their zithers in quiet anticipation. Nobles from every corner of the empire arrived in shimmering waves, their laughter pitched too high, their smiles stretched too wide. This was the night when masks, literal and figurative, were worn by everyone. But for Mei-lin, the feast meant something far more dangerous. She was being summoned back. A letter had arrived at the Wen estate that morning, sealed with the Imperial Phoenix. Wen Ji had accepted the message with dutiful composure, but Mei-lin saw the worry flicker in his eyes as he broke the seal. "The Emperor requests our attendance," he said slowly, reading the scroll. "Tonight." Mei-lin's heart sank. Not a request, she thought, a command. And she knew exactly why she was being called. The palace wanted to see her, to observe her, to test her loyalty. perhaps even to deliver judgment on her hesitation. The hidden bride, the spy, who had confronted her near the willow pond, had not been idle. Mei-lin could almost feel her presence watching from every shadow of the estate. Every hour that passed without action felt like a tightening noose. And now the palace was drawing the rope itself. Dusk fell quickly. Servants dressed Mei-lin in a gown of deep jade silk, embroidered with winding gold cranes. Her hair was styled into an elaborate bridal twist, adorned with jade pins sharp enough to kill. As they worked, Wen Ji stood nearby. He watched her with quiet intensity, his brow furrowed. "You look troubled," he said gently. "I am only nervous. I have not appeared before the court before." "You will not be alone," he said. "I will be beside you the entire night." The warmth in his words struck her like a blade. Somehow, his kindness felt sharper than any needle she had handled, because she might not be able to protect him. And the palace was waiting. Wen Ji's fingertips brushed hers briefly, a small, hesitant touch, but enough to send heat blooming across her cheeks. "I want to trust you," he said quietly, as if afraid of hearing his own confession. Mei-lin swallowed hard. "You can." Even if she wasn't sure she deserved that trust. The palace was a storm of color and movement. Lantern light shimmered across golden columns. Musicians played elegant melodies. Servants carried platters of jeweled food, glazed pheasant, spiced lotus root, mooncakes with silver-dusted tops. Everywhere Mei-lin looked, nobles bowed and smiled and whispered behind their fans. Their eyes lingered on her longer than she liked. But one pair of eyes was sharper than the rest. Empress Xun. She glided through the hall like a moonlit specter, robes trailing behind her in perfect waves. Her hair was pinned with gold and obsidian pieces shaped like phoenix wings. Her gaze swept across the gathered guests with serene authority,
Then landed on Mei-lin. Mei-lin's breath froze. The Empress held her stare for a single moment, just long enough to send a cold shiver down Mei-lin's spine before looking away, giving no outward sign of recognition. But the message had been unmistakable. "I see you. I see everything." Wen Ji placed a steady hand at Mei-lin's back. "Stay close," he murmured. She nodded, but her heart was trembling beneath her silk robes. As they moved through the hall, Mei-lin caught sight of the hidden bride, dressed as a palace attendant tonight. Her expression was mild, but her eyes were sharp and cold. A silent reminder, a silent threat. "Kill him, or I will." Mei-lin turned away quickly, throat tightening. When the emperor arrived, the hall fell silent. He was carried in on an ornate platform, pale-faced and tired-looking, his once powerful frame thinned by illness. The Empress walked beside him, smiling warmly enough that no one else noticed how her hand lingered near the emperor's, protective, controlling, or both. The feast began. Music rose, dancers spun like drifting petals, wine flowed, laughter swelled, but beneath the beauty, the air was thick with distrust. Mei-lin felt it in every glance, every hushed conversation. She felt it most keenly when Wen Ji was approached by a high-ranking minister, a sharp-eyed man with a serpentine smile. "Lord Wen," the minister said, bowing just enough to be polite. "How fortunate we are to see you tonight. You've been quite busy in the southern provinces, haven't you?" Wen Ji kept his tone polite. "Only carrying out my duties." "Duties," the minister repeated, studying him. "Curious, isn't it? A man with no ambition suddenly gains a bride gifted by the Empress herself." Mei-lin stiffened. The minister's gaze slid to her. "And such a lovely bride. Quite an honor." His smile did not reach his eyes. Wen Ji placed a protective hand on Mei-lin's arm. "We are grateful to the palace." The minister's gaze flicked to Mei-lin again, sharp and knowing. "I'm sure she is useful." The word made Mei-lin's stomach twist. Before she could react, Wen Ji subtly shifted his stance, positioning himself slightly in front of her. A shield. He was shielding her. She stared at him, stunned. The minister bowed again and drifted away like smoke. When he was gone, Wen Ji turned to her. "Mei-lin, I don't know what is happening, but whoever sent you to me did not send you for marriage alone." She froze. He knew. Not everything, not the full truth, but he knew enough to be in danger. A tremor slid down her spine.
He took her hand softly, public, bold, risking scandal, and held it between his fingers. "Whatever burden you carry," he said quietly, "you do not have to face it alone." Her heart clenched, her breath caught. She had been trained to resist emotion, to sever attachment, to serve cold logic and quiet death. But Wen Ji's sincerity was unraveling her training thread by thread. And her heart was no longer under her control. Suddenly, the music stopped. A tense silence rippled across the hall. The emperor had coughed, hard, and doubled over. Servants rushed forward. The empress seized his arm, shouting for physicians. The nobles erupted into panicked whispers. A murmur shot through the crowd. Was the emperor poisoned? By whom? During the feast? Who touched his cup? Mei-lin felt cold terror coil in her gut. At a feast full of masked intentions, accusations rose like smoke. And she, a poison bride, stood at the center of the inferno. Wen Ji instinctively stepped closer to her, shielding her again. But others were watching. Suspicious eyes. Hungry eyes. Even the hidden bride's face sharpened with interest. Gleeful interest. "This is it," her eyes seemed to say. "Your hesitation has created chaos." The emperor wheezed, clutching his chest. Physicians arrived with herbs and powders, trying desperately to revive him. The empress's face was a mask of fury and fear. She sealed the gates, she commanded. "No one leaves the palace tonight." Guards slammed the giant doors shut so forcefully that the golden phoenix plaques rattled. Gasps rippled across the hall. The empress's gaze swept the room like a blade. "Someone," she said, voice cold enough to breeze blood, "has tried to poison the Son of Heaven."
Mei-lin felt her pulse beating in her throat. The Empress's next words were even colder. "And I will find them." Wen Ji's fingers tightened protectively around Mei-lin's wrist. Mei-lin's breath shook. Because in that moment, surrounded by suspicion, locked inside a palace that had trained her to kill and now demanded someone's blood, she knew one thing with terrifying clarity. She was no longer just a bride with a forbidden heart. She was a suspect, a target, a threat. And if she didn't uncover the truth quickly, the Empress would destroy not only her, but Wen Ji too. The palace was transformed the moment the gates slammed shut. What had been a glittering hall of celebration turned instantly into a gilded prison. Servants froze where they stood. Dancers clutched their silk sleeves nervously. Nobles glanced about with widening eyes. The music had stopped, the laughter had died, and even the lantern flames seemed to dim, as if afraid to burn too brightly under the Empress's gaze. Mei-lin felt her pulse thudding against her ribs like a trapped bird. She stood at Wen Ji's side, too close to danger, too far from safety.
The emperor lay slumped on his throne-like chair, his breath shallow, his fingers trembling. The empress did not tremble. Her face was carved from stone as she raised her hand for silence. The hall obeyed her instantly. Even fear bowed beneath her authority. The emperor has been poisoned. Her words hung in the air like smoke, darkening every breath. This feast, she continued, was meant to celebrate unity. Instead, someone has used it as an opportunity to commit treason. A murmur rose. Who would dare? Who touched his cup? Was it the kitchen, the servants, or someone new? Mei-lin felt those last words land like a knife. Someone new. A bride recently sent out. A woman no one knew. A perfect scapegoat. She forced her face into the calm neutrality she had been trained to maintain, but her heart was spiraling. Wen Ji leaned close, whispering, "Do not show fear, not here." His steady tone was the only warmth in the freezing hall. The empress raised her voice. "No one will leave until the culprit is found. The doors will remain sealed until dawn. Every person present will be questioned." Her gaze swept the hall, slow, deliberate, assessing. When her eyes passed over Mei-lin, Mei-lin felt the weight of 7 years of imperial ruthlessness press down on her. The questioning began immediately. Guards separated guests into clusters. Servants were herded together, nobles in another group, entertainers in a third. Each person was approached by court investigators, holding scrolls and brushes, taking notes with cold precision. Mei-lin watched all of it with growing dread. The hidden bride, her shadow in servant's clothing, stood near the empress. Her posture was perfect, her face serene. She was here to report any misstep, to condemn Mei-lin if necessary. A chill crawled up Mei-lin's spine. "Lady Mei-lin," a guard said, approaching her, "you and Lord Wen will step forward." Wen Ji stepped protectively in front of her, his jaw tense. "You will question us together." The guard hesitated. Wen Ji was respected, a man of military honor. Few dared cross him openly. "Very well," the guard said. Mei-lin exhaled shakily. They were led to a smaller circle near the banquet's edge. A pair of investigators waited, brushes poised. "Name," one demanded. "Wen Ji." "Wife?" "Mei-lin." The investigator's gaze lifted to Mei-lin. His eyes flickered. Recognition? Suspicion? She could not tell. "When were you last near the emperor's table?" he asked. "Never," Mei-lin replied. "I stayed in the central hall." "Did you bring food or drink to the emperor?" "No." "Did you prepare anything for the feast?" "No." The investigator scribbled quickly. Wen Ji's tone sharpened. "Are you suggesting my wife is involved in this?" The investigator didn't flinch. "We suggest nothing. We only record facts." Mei-lin kept her expression serene, but her thoughts raced. She needed to slip away, just enough to listen, just enough to find a hint of truth, just enough to survive. But how could she when every corner held lanterns and watchers? Suddenly, drums beat once, low and ominous. All heads turned. The empress had risen. She stood on the platform beside the emperor, who was slowly recovering, his breaths less ragged, although his face remained chalk pale. "The physicians have determined the poison," Empress Xun announced. Silence fell. "Ash lotus." Gasps erupted.
Ash lotus was the deadliest, most refined poison known within the empire. A poison Mei-lin had handled, a poison she had seen melt lacquer, a poison only palace-trained brides knew. The Empress's voice dropped into ice. Only those trained in the inner palace know how to prepare or handle such a toxin. Someone here has betrayed me. Mei-lin's stomach lurched. This wasn't merely an investigation. This was a trap, one set long before the feast began, one designed to catch someone specific, her. Unless someone else had planned this, someone with access, someone bold enough to strike the emperor, someone within the Empress's own circle? Mei-lin's gaze drifted to the hidden bride. For the first time, she noticed something odd, a small stain on her sleeve. Faint, pinkish, barely visible under lantern light. Her pulse quickened. Ash lotus distillate had no color, but the preparation process sometimes left residue. Tiny flecks of the crushed petals used to extract the base toxin, a pale pink dust. The hidden bride saw her looking and gently folded her hands behind her back. Too slow. Suspicion flared in Mei-lin's chest like a struck flint. The investigators moved to the next group. Mei-lin lifted her sleeve slightly, trying to draw attention away from herself, but she kept her breathing measured. But her mind raced. Who poisoned the emperor? Was it the hidden bride? Was she framed as well? Or was this an internal struggle within the Empress's faction?
Before Mei-lin could piece the thoughts together, another sound cut the hall. A servant screamed. Heads snapped toward the sound. A young maid had collapsed beside a platter of wine flasks. Her hands shook violently, her lips turning blue. The Empress's eyes narrowed. "Seize her!" Guards rushed forward. "She's been poisoned!" someone shouted. "No," another voice said. "She's been silenced." Mei-lin pushed her way closer. The maid convulsed weakly, gasping for air. Her eyes rolled upward. Recognition flashed in Mei-lin's mind. Whisper root poisoning. Faye had taught her the exact symptoms. Someone had poisoned the maid to keep her from speaking. But speaking about what? Mei-lin knelt quickly beside the maid, ignoring the shocked gasps from the nobles. "Her throat," she muttered. "It's constricting. She cannot breathe. She didn't take enough to kill instantly, but—" A guard stepped forward. "Stand back!" Mei-lin ignored him. She reached for the maid's collar, pressing 2 points Faye had shown her, pressure points near the throat that could delay the toxin's spread. The maid gasped, shuddering, but she stopped convulsing long enough to look at Mei-lin with terrified clarity. "Violet, purple seal, the wine, not the Emperor's, but—" Her eyes widened. Her entire body froze. She went still, dead. Mei-lin's breath trembled. She felt Wen Ji's hand on her shoulder. "You tried to help," he whispered. But Mei-lin hardly heard him. Her mind spun. Violet, purple seal, wine. Someone had tampered with more than one flask, not just the Emperor's. Whose? Wen Ji's group had been seated near the mid-level officials, many of whom were quietly resisting some of the Empress's reforms. The Empress was ruthless enough to orchestrate a purge. Mei-lin's blood ran cold. What if the poisoning wasn't an attack on the Emperor at all? What if the Emperor was merely bait? Her eyes lifted, and for the first time that night, she saw the truth clearly. The Empress was not frightened. She was controlling the scene. Her expression was perfectly measured. Her hand rested lightly on the Emperor's chair. Her eyes scanned the hall, not with worry, but calculation.
control, anticipation. She was watching who panicked, who ran, who accused others. She was testing loyalties, and she was culling threats. Mei-lin felt the floor tilt beneath her. Wen Ji was in danger not because he had done anything wrong, but because he was a quiet man with influence in the southern provinces, a man who would refuse to play the political games others indulged in, a man the Empress could not control, a man she might eliminate quietly in the chaos, unless Mei-lin did something. Wen Ji leaned close to her ear. "What did the maid say?" Mei-lin whispered back, "There are more poisoned flasks, and they're meant for someone important." Wen Ji stiffened. "Who?" "I don't know," but she had a suspicion, a dangerous suspicion. She turned toward the wine table and felt her breath catch. A flask with a purple wax seal sat near the edge, next to cups meant for Wen Ji's cluster of officials. The realization hit her like a blow. The poison wasn't meant for the Emperor. It was meant for Wen Ji, or one of the men under his command. This wasn't an assassination attempt. It was a purge masked as one. A purge only the Empress could orchestrate. A purge she would pin on someone else later. The hidden bride stepped forward then, reaching toward the purple-sealed flask as if to inspect it. Mei-lin reacted instinctively. She lunged. Her hand slapped onto the table.
The flask toppled, smashing against the marble floor. Wine splashed everywhere. Gasps tore through the hall. The hidden bride froze, her eyes flicking to Mei-lin with cold fury. The Empress's voice sliced the silence razor-sharp. Number 37. Mei-lin turned slowly, bowing, concealing the frantic hammering of her heart. "Yes, Your Majesty." The Empress's gaze was iron. "Explain." And Mei-lin, poison bride, forbidden heart, new wife, and now the only person in the hall who understood the truth, lifted her chin. Because she no longer had the luxury of silence. The Night of Thousand Lanterns was no longer about celebration. It was war. The hall had fallen silent, utterly, absolutely silent. Red lanterns trembled overhead, their flames flickering as if sensing the tension thick enough to choke on. Nobles stood frozen mid-breath, ministers clutched their sleeves, servants held their heads low. Even the Emperor, still pale, recovering from what now looked like more of a staged collapse, sat stiffly, watching from behind half-lidded eyes. But none watched more intently than Empress Xun. Her gaze locked onto Mei-lin with the precision of a drawn bow. And once the Empress fixed her attention on someone, that person usually did not live long. Mei-lin felt every eye in the hall turn toward her. She bowed, keeping her movements calm, even as her heart pounded so fiercely she wondered if the entire court could hear it. "Your Majesty," she said softly, "I destroyed the flask because it was poisoned." A ripple of murmurs shot through the hall. The Empress lifted one eyebrow, barely. "You accuse the wine of being tainted? On what authority?" Her tone was smooth, deceptively calm. Mei-lin swallowed. "On the authority of my training and what I witnessed tonight." "The Emperor's cup was poisoned. Are you claiming a second attempt?" "No, Your Majesty." Mei-lin raised her gaze. "I claim the Emperor was never the true target." The hall erupted. "Impossible! Treasonous! What is she implying? A bride dares?" Wen Ji stepped forward instantly, trying to shield her, but Mei-lin moved beside him, not behind him. This was not a moment for fear. This was a moment to survive. Instructor Fei's lessons flashed in her mind.
Use your voice only when necessary. Speak truth only when it cannot be ignored. A weapon must know when to cut.
Mei-lin chose this moment to cut. She stepped past Wen Ji and faced the Empress directly. "Your Majesty, the Emperor's symptoms did not match ash lotus poisoning. Ash lotus kills quickly, cleanly, but His Majesty merely weakened, then stabilized." A collective gasp swept through the hall. Empress Xun did not blink. "Are you questioning the palace physicians?" "I question the intention behind the display," Mei-lin answered, softly but firmly, "and the timing of the maid who died moments later." The Empress's fingers curled slightly at her side, but her face remained impassive. "Continue, if you dare," she said. Mei-lin bowed again. The maid's symptoms were whisper root, a toxin used to silence. Wen Ji stiffened. The hidden bride's eyes narrowed. Mei-lin pressed on. Whoever poisoned the maid intended to silence her because she knew the truth, that the purple-sealed flask was meant for someone else. "And who," the Empress asked, slowly, "do you claim this someone else is?" The hall waited. Mei-lin hesitated only a heartbeat. Then she spoke. "Lord Wen Ji." The hall exploded. Wen Ji's breath caught. The ministers in his circle recoiled. The guards tensed, hands on swords. The Empress finally took a single step forward. Her perfume, a sharp blend of sandalwood and cold jasmine, brushed the air between them. "And why," she said, her voice dangerously soft, "would anyone wish to poison Lord Wen?" Mei-lin kept her gaze firm. "Because he has influence in the southern provinces, influence that has grown without relying on the palace, influence that inspires loyalty." The Empress's eyes glinted. "Loyalty is not treason." "No," Mei-lin agreed, "but independence is inconvenient." A few ministers gasped. Fear rippled through the hall like a wave. The Empress took another step forward, her expression unreadable. "You walk a dangerous line, 37. "I walk the line truth demands," Mei-lin answered, heart hammering. "The poison was in Lord Wen's wine, not the Emperor's." The hidden bride finally stepped out from the line of attendants.
"Your Majesty," she said calmly, "the girl is lying. I saw her approach the wine table before the feast began." Mei-lin's stomach dropped. She expected this. The hidden bride bowed. "She had opportunity. She had training. She is new, untested. What better way to prove herself than to stage a crisis?" Whispers surged. "Yes, yes. She destroyed the evidence. Perhaps she is the assassin. A bride like that, dangerous." Mei-lin felt the ground slipping beneath her. But Wen Ji stepped beside her, eyes blazing. "Enough! My wife would not harm anyone, not even a fly." The hall quieted at the intensity of his tone. The Empress Xun regarded Wen Ji with mild amusement. "You defend her fiercely. He saved a dying maid, and he saved me from drinking that poison." The Empress Xun tilted her head. "Or she saved you from discovering that she planted it." The accusation rang through the hall like a thrown blade. Mei-lin felt a deep, nauseating dread. The Empress was baiting her, testing her, cornering her. Mei-lin forced herself to breathe evenly, forced herself to think. "Fei taught me to survive. The Empress taught everyone else to trust my silence. I must use that silence now." She bowed deeply. "Your Majesty, I ask only one thing." The Empress's eyebrow rose. "A request? Now?" "Yes," Mei-lin replied, lifting her head. "Allow me to demonstrate what true ash lotus poisoning looks like." The hall went dead still. The Empress did not breathe for a moment. Then she spoke. "Explain." Mei-lin nodded toward the table of wine flasks.
The shattered flask contained no residue, no scent, no discoloration. The Emperor's cup contained traces of something else, frost blossom powder, a sedative, not a killer. Gasps, fear, realization. If His Majesty had consumed ash lotus, Mei-lin continued carefully, he would be dead. The Empress's gaze sharpened, dangerously. Are you suggesting someone faked an assassination attempt? Mei-lin bowed again. I suggest nothing, Your Majesty. I present only facts.
The Empress studied her for a long, tense moment. A convenient distinction. Mei-lin swallowed hard. The Empress turned toward her eunuchs. Where are the remains of the bride who died yesterday? A pair of eunuchs hurried forward with a small covered tray, containing the remnants of the bride from Chapter 1, Binger. Mei-lin hadn't expected that. The Empress removed the cloth. Binger's skin had turned faintly blue at the lips, but her veins held no ash lotus blackening. The Empress's mouth tightened. Mei-lin stepped forward. Frost blossom leaves the same blue tint on the lips when mixed with wine. It mimics poison but causes only temporary paralysis. Shock rippled across the hall. So the Emperor, a mister whispered, was never dying at all, another finished. Empress Xun's expression did not change, but something behind her eyes flickered, calculating, angry. The hidden bride stepped forward in desperation. Your Majesty, she lies. But Mei-lin had reached her limit. She turned to the Empress and knelt until her forehead touched the floor. Your Majesty, she said softly, if you command my death now, I accept it. But do so knowing this. Someone close prepared a false poisoning to purge Lord Wen. Not me, not any bride. Someone with access to the imperial table. Someone who believed they could use the confusion of the feast to remove a quiet threat. A crack appeared in the hall's collective breath. The Empress did not speak. Mei-lin continued. I may be nothing, but I know one thing. If you kill me, the real traitor wins. Silence. Then, soft steps. The Empress walked to stand before her.
Mei-lin did not lift her head. A single finger touched her chin. She froze as the Empress gently lifted her face. The Empress studied her closely, uncomfortably closely. You, Empress Xun murmured, are troublesome. Mei-lin's heart stopped. But the Empress released her chin and turned away. You are not wrong. The hall erupted into gasps. Mei-lin nearly collapsed with relief. But then, the Empress spoke again. However, 37, Mei-lin stiffened. Your hesitation at the Wen estate did not escape me. Her blood ran cold. I granted you a mission. You failed. Mei-lin's breath trembled. Your Majesty, Silence. Empress Xun's eyes sharpened into steel. You spared Lord Wen. You hesitated. You disobeyed. Mei-lin bowed her head. I hesitated because I needed the truth. Truth, the Empress repeated. Truth does not concern weapons, only results. The Empress turned, her voice suddenly ringing through the hall. Number 37, you have failed your mission. Mei-lin felt the world shift. And for that, the Empress continued, you must die. She raised her hand when Wen Ji suddenly moved. He stepped between them. My Empress, he said, bowing deeply but boldly. If she dies, then you must kill me too. The hall collapsed into chaos. Wen Ji! Treason! Insanity! He challenges the throne! Mei-lin gasped. Wen Ji, no! Wen Ji did not look away from the Empress. If she dies, he repeated. "I cannot live, and the southern provinces will not forget." Silence. Dead silence. The Empress's expression hardened, then softened, then hardened again. Finally, she smiled. Not kindly, like a woman who had just gained something new. "Very well," she said. "Both of you will live." Mei-lin's breath rushed out, but then the Empress's smile deepened. "But know this, bride who refused to kill." Her voice dropped to a whisper, filled with cold promise.
"I will make you regret your mercy." The Empress's decree echoed across the banquet hall, its cold edges slicing through the murmurs, pressing the entire court into a suffocating silence. Mei-lin felt the words coil around her like a binding rope. "I will make you regret your mercy." But beneath that chilling promise was something far more dangerous. The Empress had spared her, publicly, which meant the punishment would not come swiftly. It would come strategically, and that was always worse. The guards withdrew their hands from their swords. Nobles exhaled shallow breaths. Musicians remained frozen, fingers trembling above silent strings. Only Empress Xun moved, descending the platform with the slow, elegant precision of a predator that had already chosen its next hunt. Wen Ji stood rigid beside Mei-lin, his jaw clenched, his eyes burning with equal parts relief and dread. The Empress passed close enough for him to see the faintest curl of satisfaction at her lips. "You have earned your place in this game," she murmured to him, "but do not mistake survival for victory." Wen Ji bowed, but his fists tightened. The Empress walked on. The hall exhaled as if released from an invisible grip, but the Empress's grasp had not loosened. It had simply shifted direction. Toward her, toward Wen Ji, toward anyone who might threaten the delicate power she held. As the court returned to uneasy whispers, Mei-lin leaned toward Wen Ji. "You shouldn't have spoken up like that. You've made yourself a target, a bigger one." Wen Ji shook his head. "What was I supposed to do? Watch them take you away? I won't allow it." "You could have died," she pressed. He met her gaze steadily. "Then I would have died refusing to be a coward." The words struck her with a force that made her breath catch. No one had ever defended her like that. Not in the palace, not in her childhood, not in any chapter of her life. And deep within her chest, something fragile and forbidden unfurled. Affection, respect, love. Dangerous, untrained, and impossible. But she couldn't embrace it, not now, because danger had not passed. It had only begun. The feast ended under the Empress's strict order. Guests were escorted under guard to their carriages. No one dared protest. Mei-lin and Wen Ji remained close, moving with the flow of nobles exiting the hall. Lanterns swayed violently as the wind picked up, casting jagged shadows across the palace courtyard. Before they reached the outer gates, a calm but commanding voice called out, "Number 37. Mei-lin stiffened. She turned slowly. Instructor Fei stood beneath a flaming lantern. Her robes blended into the darkness, but her eyes were sharp as always. Sharper now, filled with worry she barely concealed. Wen Ji stepped slightly in front of Mei-lin, but she touched his arm lightly. "It's all right." Fei approached them and bowed. "Lord Wen, the palace thanks you for your vigilance tonight, but I request a moment with your wife." "She is not safe here," Wen Ji hesitated. "No one is safe here,"
Fei said quietly, "but what I have to say will keep her alive." Wen Ji looked at Mei-lin, searching her eyes. She nodded. "Go to the carriage. I'll join you soon." Reluctantly, Wen Ji obeyed, remaining close enough to intervene if needed. Fei turned to Mei-lin, expression unreadable. "You spoke truth tonight." "Would you rather I had lied?" Mei-lin whispered. "I would rather you survived," Fei said low. "And now you are closer to death than ever." "I didn't accuse the Empress," Mei-lin said. "I never said she—" "You implied," Fei interrupted. "Implications can be deadlier than accusations." Mei-lin swallowed. "Why did the Empress let me live?" "Because she surprised you," Fei answered, "and because she wants to see what you will do next."
"I won't kill Wen Ji," Mei-lin said firmly. Fei's jaw tightened. "Then you must destroy the reason he was marked." "Which is?" Fei scanned their surroundings before leaning closer. "The Empress has enemies, not just in court, but in the territories. Lord Wen Ji is caught between factions. His silence makes him a threat. If he doesn't swear loyalty, he must be eliminated." Mei-lin felt dread sink deeper. "And if I protect him?" Fei's gaze hardened. "Then you oppose the Empress." "I'm not her enemy," Mei-lin whispered. "I just want a life," Fei finished softly. "A choice. Peace." Mei-lin's breath trembled. Fei shook her head slowly. "In this place, those desires are more dangerous than poison." "Then why help me?" Mei-lin asked. For the briefest moment, Fei's mask cracked. "Because once, long ago, I was you." The wind caught Fei's sleeve as she stepped back. "Leave now, return to the Wen estate, and be ready. The Empress will not strike openly. She will make you suffer in places you cannot anticipate." She paused. "And next time, even I may not be able to protect you." Fei turned and vanished into the shadows. Mei-lin stood frozen, the weight of Fei's words settling over her like snow. Cold, silent, suffocating. When she finally reached the carriage, Wen Ji helped her in without a word. Only when the palace gates closed behind them did he take her hand, squeezing it gently. "That was reckless," he murmured. "It was necessary," she replied. But inside, Mei-lin felt as if she were standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing the Empress stood behind her, ready to push. The night after the feast did not end peacefully. Halfway through the journey home, their carriage suddenly lurched and came to a stop. The driver shouted in alarm. Wen Ji moved instantly, shielding Mei-lin as he grabbed the dagger hidden in his sleeve. "Stay behind me." But Mei-lin already sensed it. An ambush. She recognized the faint scent of wolf's breath powder lingering in the air, a common sedative used by palace assassins. Shadows moved between the trees. Figures stepped forward, masked, dressed in black, silent.
Not bandits, not rebels, assassins, sent from the palace, sent by the Empress. Mei-lin felt her pulse steady. This she could face. This she had been trained for. The Hall of Red Ink had not broken her. The House of Silent Needles had sharpened her. Every lesson Fei had forced into her blood now screamed to life.
The assassins surrounded them. 6, she counted quickly. 6 trained killers. Wen Ji readied himself, but Mei-lin grabbed his forearm. "No, don't fight. Protect yourself only." "And what will you do?" he demanded. Her eyes hardened. "What I was trained to do." Before he could stop her, Mei-lin stepped from the carriage, her jade hairpin glinting under the moonlight. The assassins paused. One spoke, a voice familiar, female. "You should have completed your mission, 37. The hidden bride stepped into view, eyes cold as frozen glass. "You betrayed the Empress. Now you die." Mei-lin twirled the jade hairpin between her fingers. "Funny," she said softly. "I was thinking the same thing about you." The hidden bride sneered. "You lack the resolve to kill. I don't." Mei-lin tightened her grip. Resolve. She would show her resolve tonight. For Wen Ji, for herself, for the life she wanted to claim. The assassins charged.
Mei-lin moved. She ducked a blade, seized a wrist, twisted, and drove her jade hairpin into the assassin's throat. Blood sprayed. She pivoted, using the collapsing body as cover. Her heel struck another attacker's knee, hard. Bone cracked. She snatched the fallen blade, blocking another strike. She felt nothing. No fear. No hesitation. Only cold clarity. A hand grabbed her shoulder. She spun and slashed. Another attacker lunged. She ducked beneath the blade and sliced upward. 3 down. 3 remaining. Wen Ji fought behind her, using every skill he had learned in years of military service. But he was outnumbered and unarmored. "Wen Ji!" Mei-lin cried. The hidden bride attacked then, moving with inhuman speed. Her needle flashed, dripping with dark toxin. Mei-lin barely deflected it. "You can't win," the hidden bride hissed. "I was trained longer, harder. I follow orders without question." Mei-lin met her gaze. "And I follow something stronger." "And what is that?" the bride mocked. Mei-lin's voice dropped to a whisper. "Choice." Their blades clashed. Steel rang against steel. The hidden bride slashed Mei-lin's arm, shallow but painful. Mei-lin retaliated with a swift kick to her ribs. They collided again, a whirlwind of silk and steel. Behind them, Wen Ji cried out. One assassin had cut his shoulder. He staggered. Rage exploded inside Mei-lin. She slammed her elbow into the hidden bride's jaw, grabbed her wrist, twisted, and drove her own poison needle back into her flesh. The hidden bride gasped, stunned. "How?" "You talk too much," Mei-lin whispered. The poison surged instantly. The hidden bride collapsed, eyes wide with shock and hatred. The remaining assassins faltered. Wen Ji finished the one nearest him with a sharp, brutal strike. The last fled into the forest.
Silence fell. Heavy. Broken. Alive. Wen Ji dropped to his knees, panting. Mei-lin rushed to him. "Are you hurt?" "Only a cut," he said, gripping her hand. You were incredible." Mei-lin looked at the fallen assassins, her breath finally shaking. "I used to believe I was only a weapon," she whispered. "Tonight, I became something else." Wen Ji cupped her cheek gently. "You became free." Free. Her breath trembled. She wasn't free. Not yet. But she was no longer a silent blade for the Empress, and that terrified her more than poison. She helped Wen Ji stand, bracing him. "We must return home. There will be more, and soon." Wen Ji nodded, grim. "What do we do now?"
Mei-lin turned toward the palace, the distant lantern glow flickering like a warning. "We prepare," she said softly, "for the Empress's next move." For the first time in her life, Mei-lin no longer feared the palace. She feared what she was becoming, and she feared how far Empress Xun would go to stop her. Because the Empress did not tolerate defiance, and Mei-lin was now the most dangerous kind, a weapon turned against its wielder. The Wen estate was silent when Mei-lin and Wen Ji returned, too silent. The usual whisper of evening wind, the distant laughter of servants finishing their duties, the rustle of bamboo leaves, all of it felt muted, as if the entire world held its breath. Perhaps it did. Perhaps even the wind feared the Empress tonight. Wen Ji winced as Mei-lin helped him inside. His wound was shallow but painful, and the exhaustion etched across his face told her just how close they had come to death.
"You need rest," she said softly. "So do you," Wen Ji replied. "But I know you won't." He was right. Mei-lin could barely keep her hands still, her mind racing through every lesson she had ever learned, every warning Fei had whispered, every shadow that now stretched across their future. The Empress would not accept failure. She would not forgive defiance. She would not forget this night. And Mei-lin was now the one woman in the empire she could not control, the one woman she had to destroy. Wen Ji sank onto a cushion in the inner chamber, while Mei-lin lit a lantern. Its soft glow fell over his face, revealing the pallor beneath his strong features. "Let me treat your shoulder," she said, murmured. He nodded, uncharacteristically quiet. As she soaked a cloth in herbal water and pressed it to the wound, Wen Ji watched her with an intensity that unsettled and warmed her at the same time. "You protected me," he said quietly. "Not once, not twice, but again and again. You protected me first. You stood before an empress for me. An empress who will kill us both." Mei-lin swallowed hard. "We will find a way." He caught her hand, gripping it firmly. "Mei-lin, I need you to understand something. If the Empress sends troops tomorrow, if she comes for us, you must flee." "And leave you?" she whispered. "Yes," he said, voice thick with emotion. "I can buy you time. I can hold them off. But you must survive." Mei-lin shook her head, tears burning behind her eyes. "No, I will not abandon you." "You must," he insisted. "You are more than a poison bride now. But Mei-lin pressed her fingers against his lips, stopping him before he could say the one word her heart was not ready to hear. Not now. Not when they might both die before dawn. "Rest," she whispered. "Please." At last, Wen Ji allowed himself to lie down. Mei-lin covered him with a warm blanket, then brushed a loose lock of hair from his forehead. The sight of him, strong yet wounded, gentle yet fierce, made her chest tighten painfully.
She turned away. She could not cry. Not tonight. Mei-lin stepped out into the dim hallway, her senses heightening as she moved through the quiet estate. Every creak of floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside, every flicker of candlelight felt heavy with meaning. As she neared the outer courtyard, she saw a shadow detach itself from the darkness. Instructor Fei. Mei-lin's hand flew to the jade hairpin hidden in her sleeve, but Fei raised both hands calmly. "If I wanted you dead," Fei said, "I would not knock." "Then why are you here?" Mei-lin whispered. Fei stepped closer, her eyes weary, her breath visible in the chill of night. "To tell you the truth, the whole truth, before the Empress silences it forever. Mei-lin's pulse quickened. What truth? Fei looked at her with something like sorrow. You were chosen for a reason, not by chance, not even by the Empress alone. Mei-lin frowned. What do you mean? Fei hesitated, then spoke quietly. Your mother. The world stopped. My mother? Mei-lin whispered. Fei nodded. You resemble her, in your eyes, in your posture, in your defiance. Mei-lin's voice trembled. My mother died when I was small. Yes, but she did not die quietly. She was once part of the palace. She resisted the Empress's rise to power. A cold shock ran through Mei-lin. My mother worked against the Empress? Fei nodded. Not with violence, with conscience. She tried to stop the creation of the Poisoned Bride program. She tried to protect the girls the palace consumed. For that, she was exiled, and soon after, she was killed under suspicious circumstances. Mei-lin clutched the wall behind her. My mother, she was brave, she whispered. She was, Fei said, voice softening. And now you stand where she once stood, with a choice she never got to make. Mei-lin looked down at her trembling hands. She sent me here, Mei-lin whispered. The Empress sent me because of her? Yes, Fei said. She fears what you might become. What is that? Mei-lin whispered. Fei met her eyes. A woman who will not obey. A woman the Empress cannot use. A woman who might challenge her. A woman who might survive her. Mei-lin swallowed hard. Fei, what do I do? Fei stepped closer. I will help you, but understand this. After tonight, there is no going back. If you remain in the palace's shadow, you will die. If you oppose the Empress openly, you will die. The only chance you have is to remove her. Mei-lin felt her heart seize. Remove her? She whispered. Yes, Fei said. End her reign before she ends yours. Mei-lin felt dizzy. She had been trained to kill. She had been ordered to kill. She had refused to kill. Now she was being asked to do the one thing that could save thousands of lives. The one thing only a poison bride could do. Assassinate the Empress. Fei led her to the edge of the courtyard, where moonlight illuminated a small wooden box. Inside was a single vial, filled with shimmering white liquid. Ash lotus, refined to a single drop, enough to stop a heart mid-beat, and only effective when delivered by someone the Empress trusts. Mei-lin closed her eyes. Why me? She asked. Fei touched her shoulder gently. Because only you can get close enough now. Only you have her attention. Only you have her fear. And if I succeed? Mei-lin asked. Then the Empire may breathe again. And if I fail? Fei's voice dropped. Your death will be slow. Mei-lin's fingers trembled around the vial. She thought of Wen Ji. She thought of her mother. She thought of every girl inside the Court of Blossoms, waiting to be shaped into a weapon. Enough. She had survived needles. She had survived poison. She had survived the Empress's tests. She had survived an ambush. Now she would do what no poison bride had ever dared. She would strike upward. For the first time in her life, Mei-lin felt something powerful surge through her. Not fear, not obedience, not hesitation. Purpose. She closed the vial in her hand. Tell me how, she whispered. Fei exhaled, relief, pride, sorrow, all tangled into one. The Empress meets with advisors at dawn in her private garden. She always drinks from her own cup. Slip the drop into the petals floating in her tea. It will dissolve instantly. "And you?" Mei-lin asked. Fei's expression softened painfully. "My path ends tonight. I will draw attention elsewhere. Give you time. Buy your escape." Mei-lin's breath caught. "Fei, you'll die." The instructor smiled faintly. "I served 3 emperors. I served poison and power longer than any person should. Let me do one thing that matters." Before Mei-lin could speak, Fei pulled her into a brief, fierce embrace. "Survive," she whispered. Then she vanished into the night.
Hours later, Mei-lin stood in the Empress's private garden, the dawn just beginning to touch the sky with pale blue. The Empress entered, serene as ever, her robes trailing like shadows on the path. "Number 37, she said, without turning her head. "You survived the night." Mei-lin bowed, stepping closer with the tray of tea she carried. "I live only to serve your Majesty." The Empress smiled, a thin, deadly smile. "Poor." Mei-lin lifted the teapot, her hands perfectly steady. Inside her sleeve, the vial was already empty. The petals in the Empress's cup swirled gently. A drop. 1 drop. The Empress lifted the cup, then paused. Something flickered in her eyes. Mei-lin's breath stopped, but the Empress merely smiled, satisfied. "You truly were my finest bride." She raised the cup to her lips, drank, and exhaled. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Empress's eyes widened. Her fingers twitched. Her breath hitched. She fell to her knees, clutching her chest. Mei-lin caught her as she fell, not out of mercy, but to whisper the one truth she needed to hear. "I am not your bride. I am my mother's daughter." The Empress's lips trembled. And then she was still.
The palace erupted in chaos. Guards shouted, eunuchs ran, ministers panicked. Mei-lin did not stay to watch. Fei's diversion, explosions in a distant hall, sent half the palace running in the opposite direction, allowing Mei-lin to slip through the hidden passages Fei had described. By the time the sun rose, she had vanished. By the time the ministers gathered, the Empress lay dead. By the time suspicion spread, Mei-lin was already far beyond the city walls. She arrived at the Wen estate at dusk. Wen Ji rushed to her immediately, pulling her into his arms. "You came back," he whispered. Mei-lin rested her forehead against his chest, breath trembling. "I promised." Wen Ji held her fiercely. "What happens now?" Mei-lin looked up at the horizon, at the empire she had changed with a single drop of poison. "Now," she whispered, "we live." "And the palace?" Wen Ji asked. Mei-lin's gaze hardened. "The palace will rebuild itself. Someone else will rise to power. But not like her. Never like her." Wen Ji touched her cheek. "And you?" "Mei-lin, I am no longer a poison bride," Mei-lin said softly. He smiled gently. "Then what are you?" Mei-lin took his hands in hers. "I am the last lotus bride and the first woman to choose her own fate." They stood together as lanterns lit the twilight sky, thousands of them, floating upward like souls finally freed. The night was no longer filled with poison. It was filled with possibility, and for the first time, Mei-lin believed she could live not as a weapon, but as herself.